Hey guys, welcome back to Annie's Dinosaur Reviews, and we have something very cool to look at today. This is the Tsukuda Dilophosaurus Spitter model, the 1/20th scale. There are actually quite a few models out there from Tsukuda, and there's just a ton of Jurassic Park ones that were released years ago, and unfortunately they're very hard to find, very expensive, and I was pretty lucky to acquire this and actually the 1/8 scale, I think it's the 1/8 scale Dilophosaurus model kit, in a lot on eBay a little while back, and I didn't have to pay a fortune for them, so that's a plus, and I figured why not take a look at it with you guys right here. As far as the box goes, again, it's a little beat up because that's just what time does to boxes, and considering how long ago these were released, it's not surprising in the least, but you can again see that beautiful Jurassic Park logo up there. Anytime I see a Jurassic Park logo like that, I get excited. And then JP down here with a Dilophosaurus skull silhouette, and then of course the figure itself and PVC display model right there. If we take a look at the side, there's some stuff that I can't read, and then if we take a look at this side, we can read it, so that's 1/20th scale, Dilophosaurus Spitter, again PVC display model series. And then taking a look at the back of the box, you can see some of the other figures that were in this line, the smaller PVC figures. You've got a Rex, a Triceratops, a Brachiosaurus, Velociraptor, the Dilophosaurus, which we'll look at today, and then the Gallimimus. Unfortunately, I literally have none of them except for the Dilophosaurus that we're about to look at. So, I am super psyched to take this out of the box and look at it with you guys right now. So let's pull this baby out and get a look at it. And here is our Dilophosaurus. One thing that I think everyone can tell straight away is that the colors actually do not match up to what you see in Jurassic Park, but personally I don't think that takes away from the figure or anything. I still think it's really cool, and just because it's a piece of Jurassic Park history, I always have a soft spot for any of these figures, and I'm absolutely dying to get the others, but for now I'll settle with just this and the other Dilophosaurus that I have, especially as Dilophosaurus is probably one of the most iconic but least represented species from all of the films. I absolutely loved the Dilophosaurus in Jurassic Park, and I think I'm not alone when I say that. Most people always did. I don't understand why they decide not to put it in any of the other films. Hopefully Jurassic World 3 will correct that issue, but again, looking at the figure straight away, it looks really, really cool, so let's go ahead and get a closer look at it right now. Taking a look up here at the head sculpt looks pretty good. It definitely looks like a Jurassic Park style Dilophosaurus, and you can see as I turn it there is quite a bit of detail included and some nice paint as well. There is one thing overall on the figure that I'm not a big fan of, and that is the strong use of the gloss coat. I can actually kind of understand why they would include it, especially because the scene that the Dilophosaurus appears in takes place during a storm, so it's going to be wet. It definitely looked wet in the film, so that makes sense that it would have a wet-like appearance in this model. Now, I don't know if all of the figures that were released like this all have that gloss, because again, I only have the Dilophosaurus, but this one specifically does look kind of cool with the gloss coat on it in a way, just because it was wet in the film, but I'm not a huge fan of gloss coats like this on figures, and especially this one is overly glossy, so I feel like maybe the gloss coat was just a little bit too much. Regardless, again, you can see though, even with the gloss coat kind of shining the detail away as I turn it, you can get a good idea of the detailing included, and it does look really quite nice. Lots of skin wrinkling on the underside of the lower jaw. You've also got some beautiful detailing in the crest up there. Again, the paint of this does not really look at all like the Jurassic Park Dilophosaurus did, so that is a little bit, again, of a downside just because it doesn't follow the actual paint scheme of the film, but it still looks pretty cool. One downside in the face area, though, is the mouth, because you don't really see teeth at all, and I can kind of maybe make out teeth that are sculpted. It's really hard to tell, but they should have elaborated, I think, the inside of the mouth with like a darker color just to kind of show some difference between that and the rest of the dinosaur. But again, these are just minor nitpicks, not anything that personally I think is a huge deal, because it still really is beautiful looking as far as I'm concerned. The eye is painted with a yellowish color and a nice black pupil there. It looks like it's placed pretty well for sure, and you can see that the majority of the head kind of has like that black area up here and up on the crest, but then as you transition to the front of the snout and the front of the crest, it changes to like a light brown, so there's a little color variation there. Looking at the frill looks really cool. You can see lots of movement kind of being shown throughout the frill as it's bending and folding in certain areas and kind of being extended by the Dilophosaurus. And the paint looks really cool. It's nicely applied. I think that nice reddish coloration that kind of rings through, which is fairly similar to the Dilophosaurus in the film, does look quite nice and is really beautifully airbrushed on there. And of course the frill is outlined with a black tip here at the edges to just give it that little extra bit of flashiness. And looking at it head on there, it looks really, really cool. Looking at the top of the head, you can also see some pretty nice detailing up there. And when we turn around to the back of the frill, you can see one thing that's really cool is that they've now given it like a black stripe. A lot of the time when you get Dilophosaurus figures in the Jurassic Park style, you don't really get too much paint on the back of the frills, and luckily with this one we have, and you can also see some pretty nice detailing within the back of the frill, which is really cool to see as well. The overall detailing as far as the skin texture, once you get close to the frill, you can see is actually really quite incredible. So the sculpt is definitely pretty nice as far as making sure it's got the fine detail it needs. So moving back into the neck, you can see some really nice sculpt and detail, kind of like the muscles flexing here in the neck as we move down into the neck there. You can also see like this dark black paint kind of start to stripe down on the body, and that's primarily the design they went with as far as the paint scheme, which is similar to what you see on the Dilophosaurus. It's just that this brownish green type color as the primary body color isn't exactly the same shade as you do see on the Dilophosaurus in the film. Once you get down here into the body, you can see the arms here are quite nicely sculpted. You've got the shoulder blade there a little bit. Also kind of some skin reacting to the movement of the dinosaur. Even though the dinosaur for the most part is in a fairly neutral position, the hands have a decent sculpt, but the nails are a little sloppily painted and the fingers are all kind of sculpted together, so it doesn't look as good as it could, but considering how small this figure is, it's not too bad. As you move back into the body, you can see that the skin texture actually looks really quite nice, especially in the stomach region, and you can almost pick up on the rib cage there as well a little bit. You've got the really nicely sculpted out hip bone here. I think the overall sculpt really looks like a very Jurassic Parkish Dilophosaurus, which means they pretty much nailed it as far as the appearance of the dinosaur goes. Moving down the body, you also have some really nice skin texture and some beautiful musculature. As you move down here, you've got the kneecap present there. Moving down into the lower part of the leg, you can see the color transition from like that greenish brown type of a color to like a light brown, like a creamy type color, actually more so, or a khaki in the foot. The foot sculpt also looks really quite nice, and the nails on the feet appear to be painted pretty decently. Even the dew claw, which you can see back there, is painted, so that is a huge plus for sure. And then moving back up into the tail, again the tail sculpt looks really good, comes out to a nice curve here at the end, nice pointed tip, and the detailing as far as the skin texture also looks really good, and the paint application for the most part also looks to be really nicely done. It doesn't look sloppy or anything, it looks fairly natural on the dinosaur, so that is definitely good news also. Again, the opposing side isn't really too much different than what we just saw on the previous side, because the dinosaur, like I said, is in a fairly neutral pose, so everything over here is pretty darn close to what you saw on the opposing side. The only difference really is that this leg is like ever so slightly stepped forward, and you can see the arms are just very slightly different as far as where they're positioned, but for the most part all the detailing and sculpt looks pretty much the same on this side as you saw on the other side. The underside looks decent enough. There's not too much that we can really see, considering the Dilophosaurus is connected to the base, which you can see there. And the base itself does say JP, has that Dilophosaurus skull silhouette, 1/20th scale, and Dilophosaur right there. So it's really cool and definitely an absolutely beautiful piece of Jurassic Park memorabilia. As far as a size goes on our Dilophosaurus, again, it is fairly small. So from the head to the tail, you're looking at about 5.5 inches or 14 centimeters in length, and for a height, about 3.25 inches or around 8.5 centimeters, somewhere in that range. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Clovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon standing there petting his buddy the Dilophosaurus. But you can definitely tell next to these figures that it's not very large. It really is quite small in comparison to most Jurassic figures. But next to these figures, if you happen to have any of them, you should have a decent idea as to what the size is of this Dilophosaurus. So this is a really, really cool looking Dilophosaurus figure for sure. The smaller size of it, I feel like, is definitely appealing for some, because I know there is a strong fan base out there that follows the smaller sculpts and smaller size frames. And again, 1/20th scale, for a lot of dinosaurs, that's going to still equal out to be a pretty darn big dinosaur, but considering the size of the Jurassic Park style Dilophosaurus, it does actually end up being pretty small here in comparison to a lot of others, but I really think it's beautiful overall. The sculpt isn't quite what you would expect to see on a more modern figure, but considering how long ago these figures were actually made, the sculpt is quite impressive overall as far as the detailing goes and the paint application. The paint application is a little bit of a downside just because it doesn't look exactly like the Jurassic Park version does, but at the same time, it's decent enough, and I don't think that they were going to try to go all out as far as the paint goes and really make this a very highly accurate Jurassic Park style Dilophosaurus. It's just kind of a really cool collectible that they released pre-painted at one point in time, and personally I think it's really quite nice. Again, I don't mind that it doesn't match up perfectly as far as the paint application goes to what you see in Jurassic Park, because honestly most Jurassic Park collectibles never really do, so it's not a big deal as far as I'm concerned. The overall presentation of the figure, having that very cool base, is also really nice. Definitely helps to give it a professional look, which is really nice. The gloss coat on the dinosaur I think is my biggest gripe because it's just so glossy. Again, with it raining in the scene where the Dilophosaurus actually takes out Nedry, it makes sense that this dinosaur figure would be kind of glossy, but at the same time, personally, I think the gloss kind of shines away some of the detail and helps to prohibit showing off just how beautiful the sculpt is overall. But even with that slight issue, personally, I really love this figure, so I'm so psyched that I now have it in my collection. Again, these are long discontinued, pretty hard to find, but if you can search one out, I highly recommend picking up this or the other Dilophosaurus kits. So make sure if you want this, you search one out somewhere, maybe on eBay. Good luck, happy hunting, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell to be notified of any future videos, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.